first-person perspective of a cyclist riding a BMX bike down an urban street in the evening. The hands of the cyclist are gripping the black handlebars, wearing a light grey hoodie and blue pants. The street is lined with small buildings, some with colourful facades and storefronts and trees without leaves. A pedestrian wearing dark clothing is mid-stride crossing the street in front of the cyclist, holding an object. The sky is a mix of blue and warm tones. The image has a slightly distorted, wide-angle view, mimicking a GoPro action camera shot. In the top left corner, an overlay of a GoPro Hero 4 action camera is displayed, slightly glowing, with its lens and screen visible. This should help generate an image closely resembling the original. Let me know if you need any refinements. The first video on our list takes us deep into the wilderness, where a solo hiker set out to document his adventure. He had all the essentials: his backpack, a map, and of course, his GoPro mounted on his chest. Everything seemed normal at first. The trail was peaceful, the air crisp, and the only sounds were the crunch of his boots on the dirt and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. But then something changed. As he continued walking, he noticed the forest around him becoming eerily silent. No birds, no distant animal calls, just an unnatural stillness that sent a chill down his spine. He brushed it off as paranoia and kept moving forward. But later, when he reviewed the footage, he saw something that made his stomach drop. At one point in the video, just as he stops to take a sip of water, a dark figure appears in the background. It's not close enough to make out details, but it's there, standing completely still between the trees. The strange part, he never saw or heard anything while he was out there. Then there's a skydiver who had been waiting his entire life for this jump. With the GoPro strapped to his helmet, he took the leap, free-falling through the clouds with pure exhilaration. The footage was stunning, until something unexpected happened. Just as he pulled his parachute, the camera caught a flash of something moving in the distance. At first, it looked like debris or another skydiver, but when the video was slowed down, it became clear it wasn't human. To this day, he has no explanation for what he saw. Another clip comes from a group of friends exploring an abandoned building late at night. They were there for fun, hoping to capture some cool footage, maybe even a few harmless scares. Armed with only their flashlights and a GoPro, they laughed and joked as they wandered through the empty halls. But as they rounded a corner, they heard something, a faint whisper, just out of reach. At first, they thought it was just the wind moving through the broken windows. But then, in the playback, the audio revealed something chilling. The whisper wasn't just noise. It was a voice, and it said something that made them swear they'd never go back. These are just a few of the terrifying moments caught on GoPro that defy explanation. And trust me, it only gets crazier from here. One of the most unsettling videos comes from a mountain biker who set out alone on a remote trail. It was the perfect day for a ride: clear skies, cool air, and a winding path through dense trees. With his GoPro mounted on his helmet, he captured every twist and turn as he sped down the rugged terrain. The ride was smooth at first, but then, just as he reached a clearing, something darted across the path ahead of him. He slammed on his brakes, his heart pounding. It happened so fast that he wasn't sure if his mind was playing tricks on him. But when he checked the footage later, his stomach tightened. There, in the corner of the frame, something humanoid had moved. Too fast, too unnatural. And worst of all, it had been watching him long before he noticed. Another story comes from a diver exploring the depths of a remote lake. The water was calm, and everything seemed normal as he descended further, his GoPro capturing the silent, eerie beauty of the deep. But as he reached an old, sunken structure resting at the bottom, he noticed something strange. The visibility was low, but just outside the range of his flashlight, something moved. A dark figure, barely visible through the murky water. He turned sharply, aiming his light at the spot, but there was nothing there. Still, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. When he surfaced, shaken but relieved to be back in the open air, He assumed it had just been his imagination. That is, until he reviewed the footage. The camera had caught something that had been much closer than he ever realized. Then there's a snowboarder who ventured into the backcountry alone, excited to capture stunning footage of untouched snow and crisp mountain air. As he carved through the slopes, his GoPro caught breathtaking views of the vast landscape around him. Every one of these clips leaves behind more questions than answers. Were these just tricks of light, glitches in the footage, or something else entirely? Whatever the case, the people who lived through these moments still don't have explanations. And the scariest part, we're just getting started. Not all terrifying GoPro encounters happen in the wilderness. Some take place in the most unexpected locations, places that should feel safe. One such video comes from a traveler who booked a quiet, old errand for a weekend getaway. The house was charming, with creaky wooden floors and vintage furniture. It had character, as the host put it. Wanting to document his trip, he set up his GoPro in the corner of the living room to capture a time-lapse of the dimly lit space while he went out for the evening. But when he returned and reviewed the footage, his stomach dropped. At one point, hours after he had left an object, a chair slowly moved across the room. There was no one else there, no draft, no explanation. The time-lapse caught everything, and yet, the silence in the footage made it all the more unsettling. Then there's the group of kayakers who set out on a calm lake, excited to capture stunning GoPro footage of their adventure. The water was glassy, reflecting the deep orange hues of the setting sun. They laughed and paddled, enjoying the peace of nature. But as they drifted near the farthest end of the lake, something felt off. One of them joked about the water being too still, but beneath their light-hearted conversation, a quiet unease settled in. That's when one of them, reviewing the live feed from his GoPro, noticed something strange, something floating in the water behind them. At first, they thought it was debris, but as they turned their kayaks to get a better look, it was gone. The footage later revealed something disturbing. A dark, shadowy shape had been trailing them, just beneath the surface. No splashes, no sound, just there, and then, just as quickly, gone. A similar sense of the unknown lurks in a video recorded by a drone enthusiast exploring an abandoned town. He launched his drone high above the crumbling buildings, capturing a bird's-eye view of the eerie, abandoned town. The footage was haunting. Empty streets, broken windows, nature slowly reclaiming what was left behind. He maneuvered the drone carefully, guiding it through the skeletal remains of a school, its roof partially collapsed, desks still scattered as if waiting for students who would never return. Everything was still. Too still. But then, just as the drone hovered over a long-forgotten alleyway, something flickered across the screen. A figure. It was only there for a split second, but it had been moving, fast. His heart pounded as he rewound the footage, pausing frame by frame. The figure wasn't an animal. It wasn't a shadow. It was something else. As he stared at the screen, a chill ran down his spine. The figure wasn't just watching. It had moved closer in the frames, but he wasn't looking. He hadn't seen it with his own eyes, only through the drone's footage. But the realization hit him hard. Whatever it was, it had been aware of the camera, aware of him. His hands trembled as he pulled the drone back, trying to navigate it away from the alley. But then, right before he could lift it higher, the feed cut to static. His drone had never lost connection before, not even in dense forests. Frantically, he tried to reconnect. The battery was still full. The signal had been strong, but it was gone. Panicking, he sprinted toward the last known location, his GoPro still recording. The abandoned town was silent, the air heavy, as if it had been holding its breath. He reached the alley, scanning for his drone. Nothing. No sound. Just decaying buildings and the faint echo of his own breathing. But then, from inside a nearby doorway, something shifted. A sound subtle but distinct, the scrape of movement on the old wooden floor. He wasn't alone. Meanwhile, another GoPro video surfaced from a spelunker who had been exploring a deep cave system. mapping out tunnels that had been untouched for centuries. The further he descended, the narrower the passages became, the air growing colder, thicker. He was documenting everything: the winding rock formations, the eerie silence, the feeling of being completely alone beneath the earth. But as he crawled through a particularly tight space, something strange happened. His GoPro picked up a noise, a whisper, just faint enough that he thought it might have been his mind playing tricks on him. But as he played it back through his earpiece, the whisper was clearer now. Words, a voice, and then, the worst part, the sound of breathing, just beyond the reach of his headlamp. Terrified, he turned the camera toward the passage ahead, scanning the darkness. Nothing. The tunnel was empty. But as he slowly backed away, his GoPro caught something his eyes hadn't. A shape, just out of reach, moving with him. It was low to the ground, just beyond the shadows, and it wasn't alone. At this point, every one of these recordings shared something unsettling in common. They all captured things unseen by the people experiencing them. Shadows moving where no one should be, whispers that came from nowhere, figures watching, aware of being watched. The drone operator took a deep breath and stepped toward the dark doorway, his GoPro still recording. He knew he should turn back, leave the drone behind, but something inside him, curiosity, fear, or both, pushed him forward. He raised his. The flicker of movement sent a jolt of panic through him. He turned sharply, his flashlight shaking slightly in his grip. The dust in the air swirled, but nothing was there. His breathing was loud in the empty space, his heart hammering in his chest. Slowly, he stepped forward, his GoPro capturing everything. The floor creaked beneath him as he scanned the room, looking for any sign of what he had seen in the drone footage. But it was just an empty, crumbling space, until his foot hit something solid. Looking down, he spotted his drone lying motionless on the floor, its lights still faintly flickering. He bent down to pick it up, relieved but uneasy. It had no damage, no sign of why it had lost connection. But as he stood up, the flashlight's beam passed over the far wall, and his stomach turned to ice. Faintly scratched into the surface, almost too faded to notice, were words. Not random graffiti, not markings from the building's decay. It was a message. 3 simple words. You saw me. His pulse pounded in his ears as he backed out of the room, clutching the drone. He didn't wait to analyze it further. He didn't want to know more. Turning on his heels, he ran back through the abandoned town, not stopping until he reached his car. He threw the drone onto the passenger seat, started the engine and sped away, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. Elsewhere, the spelunker sat in front of his computer, reviewing his GoPro footage from the cave. His hands hovered over the keyboard as he replayed the whispering sounds again, trying to convince himself it was just an audio glitch, a trick of the echoes. But as he slowed the footage down, isolating the sound, his stomach tightened. The whispers weren't random. They were words. And when he pieced them together, the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They had been calling his name. Every one of these GoPro recordings had captured something beyond explanation, something that had been watching, something that had been aware of the people behind the cameras. The travelers, the adventurers, the thrill seekers, they had all walked away, but none of them would ever forget what they saw. Some deleted their footage, refusing to relive what they had experienced. Others tried to convince themselves it was just paranoia. But no matter how much they tried to explain it away, one thing remained certain. The cameras had caught something real. And maybe, just maybe, some things are better left unseen.